I'm going to read first from the work True Christian Religion. These two, good and truth, are in every single thing that comes into existence, and they can be illustrated by comparisons in many features of the human body and many phenomena of the earth. An exact comparison is with the respiration of the lungs and the systolic motion of the heart. For charity can no more be separated from faith than the heart can from the lungs. For if the heartbeat ceases, the respiration of the lungs cease at once. And if the respiration of the lungs cease, total unconsciousness occurs and inability to move any muscle, so that shortly afterward the heart also stops and all trace of life vanishes. So the question is, what's the point of knowing stuff? New Church teaching says that knowledge is nothing else than a certain means that exists to achieve an end, which is usefulness. We live in such information-rich times where you can pick up your phone, you get on the computer, you can turn on a television, you can go to a library, you can go to university, you can find so many different things, often without leaving your home. And you're being bombarded with information about germs and sunlight and indigenous trees and cross-cultural respect and all kinds of things, whether you want to be hearing them or not. We've all met walking encyclopedias who were not very functional human beings, and people who maybe weren't very smart who were living fantastically successful lives. So ultimately, knowledge serves to help us live a better life. Now, you guys all walked in knowing that, right? But the challenge is, how do we actually make that a reality in our lives? And it's so important with spiritual knowledge. 30,000 pages of Swedenborg's writings. At least 1,000 pages of the Bible. And every single sentence on every page is there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to help us live a better life. And if we don't see that, that means we don't understand that truth. It's not about passing the entrance exam to heaven, certainly not being in the right club or any of that. It's about how do we use what we know to live a better life, to serve others. And I want to talk about the story of Cain and Abel as a bit of an object lesson in how do we use knowledge. Because it's addressing a way that it went really bad, and it also actually gives us a lot of hints into what could go well. How do we use those very powerful brains that we have constructively? So if you were to look at the story and its deeper meaning, you could read it as what happened in the history of humanity, how people turned towards pride and turned away from the Lord. And at a deeper still level, you can look at it as what happens to us every day. How do we choose to use and interact with the knowledge we have and then other people based on that? So Cain and Abel stand for faith and charity, head and heart. And ideally, what you know and your desire to live well are very connected. And when they are, charity, Abel, the younger brother, as one of the children pointed out, is always in charge. Because our desire, our effort, is what leads the way. Truth, while vital, is then a tool for that desire. But in our story, Cain wanted more. And that's symbolic of when our intellect starts to take the lead too much. We want what we know to make us good enough. And here's the thing, we've all done this in varying degrees. We get caught up in what we know, and either we're looking at ourselves in the mirror thinking, how clever I am, or we're looking at other people and feeling critical or contemptuous for those people who don't know or see it the way we do. How many times have you said the phrase, I know I should? I know I should exercise. I know I should go to church more often. I know I should read the Word. I know I should drive more patiently. And what we're saying is, I know this, but I'm not doing it, right? That's Cain. But most significantly, I want to focus on those times when we have a knowledge that we believe is true, and then we end up looking at other people and having those feelings of contempt. The nice thing is, we've also all been in the place of Abel. Abel is charity. Abel is looking at other people from a place of love. Listen to this teaching that is specifically said about Abel. Charity means love toward the neighbor and compassion. For anyone who loves his neighbor as himself also has compassion for him in his suffering as much as he has for himself in his own. Isn't that a great way of thinking about it? Because you know how utterly sorry for yourself, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but you feel when life goes really bad. You know all the intensity of that emotion when things are going badly. What if we could turn that level of intensity out to other people when things aren't going well for them? So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to present 3 challenges that Cain offers us, and then ways that we can choose the Abel path. Because those challenges are the challenges to peace, to happiness, to contentment, to trust, to connectedness, to safety. Those are all those heart things that we want in our lives. And the challenge that you're going to be seeing coming up is that Cain in us has a tendency to fill us up. And we talk about someone being full of themselves, right? Well, when we're full of ourselves, there isn't place for the Lord. Whereas the Abel part of us tends to be humble and willing to sort of empty ourselves out and be receptive of the Lord. So listen to this passage from the work True Christian Religion. Anyone who separates the Lord from charity and faith takes away life from them. Charity and faith without life are either non-existent or are abortions. The Lord is life itself. Anyone who acknowledges the Lord and separates charity from him only acknowledges him with the lips. That's a pretty strong statement, isn't it? But you notice it's all about our ability to receive the Lord, and it has to do with bringing Cain and Abel together constructively. So, first challenge. How important are your own ideas to you? How important it is for you to be right? And how then do you look at other people who have different ideas from you? So we all have ideas at times, good ideas about how society should be run, how the church should go, how Janice should be working on her marriage, how George should be raising his children. And that's fine until we make those ideas too important and we lose perspective. Here's a passage that's talking about how people do this with religious knowledge, how they make a single idea too important, but I think you'll see it has application more broadly. Wherever there's any church, there arise heresies, because while people are intent on some particular article of faith, they make it the main thing. For such is the nature of our thought, that while intent on some one thing, we set it before any other. especially when our imagination claims it as a discovery of our own, or when love of self or of the world puffs us up. Everything then seems to agree with and confirm it, until at last we will swear it is so, even if it is false. So we get filled up, there's Cain again, filled up with our own idea to the point that we're wanting to apply it to lots of different people and the way they do things. And when we do that, then we start to get critical of anyone who does it differently from us. We can also do this when we start to take good ideas from the world, psychology, anything, and put it above truths from the Word. Because truth from the Lord is something that we receive when we're being humble, when we say, "You know, Lord, I don't." When we put worldly ideas ahead of that, we tend to get puffed up. So we get this kind of interaction, that criticalness happening all the time in the world, don't we? You know, on social media and politics, on talk shows, on just about anything, it's so easy for people to be critical of someone who sees things differently from them. By contrast, remember that teaching about Abel and compassion? Think about how compassion looks at someone else who sees something differently. It doesn't look down, it's respectful. It is looking for what is good in that person. It's looking for what the Lord says. One of the ways that we can apply that is by looking at people we disagree with and saying, what is the good in that person's position? What is the truth in that person's position? I may disagree that that's the best way to look at it, but if you can't see the truth in what they're saying, probably a little bit too much in Cain. Abel is willing to look and to try to understand. So that's the first challenge for Cain. Second one has to do with the offerings they bring. So the first one is how we deal with people outside of us. Second thing is, how do we deal with the Lord? Cain and Abel both brought offerings. Cain's not accepted. Abel's was. The fruit of his labors was not accepted. And that's because ideas by themselves are not receptive of anything spiritual. Ideas by themselves are useless. Think about all the threads that could be woven into something, let's say a pillowcase, just sitting there. The threads by themselves serve no purpose, right? They can't be a pillowcase. Love is what unites and binds things together. But we can sometimes think, well, I know this. That makes me right. That makes me part of this church. That makes me somehow good. And it doesn't. By contrast, Abel offers a lamb and the fat of a lamb. A lamb is a symbol for innocence, so that childlike willingness to say, well, the Lord probably knows. I want to find out what he has to say. And the fat of the lamb is a symbol for the good loves that are trying to live decently, that come to the Lord and worship. And we're told that all worship is an extension of how we live. So listen to this teaching. Essential divine worship does not consist in going to church and hearing preaching, but in a life of love, of charity and faith. In accordance with religious principles, preaching in churches serves solely as a means of instruction in matters of life. Unless you think that means it's okay to not come to church, the teaching's actually saying the exact opposite. It's saying, come to church, but come to church with the idea of learning truth that you can apply and getting strength to apply that truth that you know. So the innocent part of us comes to church having tried to live a good life, and you know what that's like, right? When you try to live a good life, you end up feeling exposed, you end up feeling weak because we never do it perfectly. And so Abel in us comes into church saying, Lord, I need you. Give me the strength to get through this day, this week. And that is what is receptive of the Lord. So how do we deal with others? Is it critically or seeking to find out what is true so that we can find points of connection? How do we approach the Lord? Is it with our heads, or is it with a humble recognition of what we need from Him? And then the third thing is, how do we respond to rejection? Cain made an offering to the Lord, it wasn't received. And then he turned around and he rejected Abel. So they both experienced rejection, but they responded to it really differently. Cain gets angry. And in New Church teaching, we read that anger is the general emotion that results from anything that gets in the way of self-love and its desires. So Cain didn't like the way the Lord had responded to him, so he lashed out. And notice he didn't lash out at the Lord, he lashed out at his little brother, which is also one of the problems with anger. I think it's kind of ironic that Cain is the intellectual part of us, but the intellectual part of us is very brittle, and when things don't go its way, it is actually prone to a lot the negative emotions, anger and criticalness and depression and all those sorts of things. So it's ironic that it's this part of us that is having these emotions, not the Abel part of us. So the Lord gave Cain a choice. Why are you angry, he said, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, is there not an uplifting? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door. And his desire, Abel's desire, is for you, and you have dominion over him. So the Lord's saying, here's your choice. Here's what happens when you make this choice. But Abel wants connection. Why don't you stop trying to control him and try to find a connection? So you have a choice. You made a bad one. Don't compound it with another one. You have a choice right now. Embrace innocence. And we see Abel's response by what the Lord said there. His desire is for you. Cain had rejected his brother. He was unhappy with him, and yet Abel still wanted that bond. Which is lovely. So how do we respond to rejection? How do you respond when you have a conflict in your life? Cain in us divides, separates. Needs the other person to see my view before we can reconcile. Not my fault. Abel is seeking to reach out, seeking to discover what it is about this situation that can lead to connectedness. There's a wonderful book on marriage that I have. Honestly, I've never read it, but the title is brilliant. The title is You Can Be Right or You Can Be Married. Okay? You can be Cain or you can be Abel, is what it's saying, right? Are you going to focus on my way or the highway, or is it about trying to find a common, connected place? Because there's humility in this. Doesn't mean you're always going to cave in or compromise your principles, but there's going to be that spirit of looking for connection. So when the anger goes too far, it becomes destructive. Cain kills Abel. Again, we've all done that, haven't we? We've lashed out. We've said hurtful things. We've done hurtful things. It's what happens as we're learning and growing. Maybe we just get so focused on being right that we can strangle a relationship. And this part of us tends to deny taking responsibility. I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? And the implicit answer of the text is yes, you are your brother's keeper. You are supposed to care enough what's happening to your brother. You are supposed to reach out when your brother is hurting. You should be trying to make amends. That's the Abel part of us, the part that is looking for the good, that is looking for connectedness. And symbolically, the word keeper in New Church teaching means one who serves. So that's the attitude. And what if we could go into all of our relationships this way in our minds? I'm here to serve this relationship. I'm here to serve you. And if both of us were doing it, well, then it's wonderful. Now that's the aspiration, and we know that we don't always do that. Sometimes Cain murders Abel. But that's not the end of the story. The Lord gives him the consequence. And he says, this is too much for me. I'm going to die. Anyone who sees me is going to kill me. Before I go to the and then, just notice that there's a component, not a very deep one, but a component of taking responsibility there. Yeah, I did it, and bad things are going to happen. There's always that chance to come back. But then the Lord puts a mark on Cain. And we talk about the mark of Cain. It's often like sort of a scarlet letter, a badge of sinfulness. But this mark was not that. This mark was actually a mark of protection. And what that mark means is that even when we use our intellect poorly, even when we're critical, even when we spend our time trying to manipulate people instead of serve them, the Lord preserves this amazing mind each of us have been given. And says, I'm not throwing that out just because you used it poorly. I'm keeping it safe in the hopes that you will then, in the future, start to use it well. That you will join with your brother and serve the purposes of charity. So here's the challenge. We can be full of our own ideas such that we look at others' ideas with contempt, with disrespect. Or we can be seeking to understand where they're coming from and engaging in dialogue from compassion and respect. Doesn't mean you won't have big headbutts, but it'll be done with a smile. Cain in us wants to worship by what we know. Abel wants to empty out so that he can be receptive. And Cain becomes annoyed, angry, contemptuous when he doesn't get what he wants, when he feels rejected. Abel seeks reconciliation. His desire is for you, even when things aren't going his way. So what can we do to give rein to Abel in us, the part of us that wants to serve, that seeks for compassion and connection? And when we have done harm, as we all do, what can we do to rein in that beautiful, powerful mind that we have to say, wait, this is here to serve. This is here to serve. That's the only reason the Lord gave me knowledge, is to serve. How can we, each of us, be humble towards the Lord and compassionate to the people around us? Amen.